Alright everyone, so we finally got to see what Loki can actually do, and it probably surpassed my expectations. There is just insane hype behind this character's power right now in a way that I think we haven't seen in One Piece in a very long time. Loki is straight up breaking a lot of the rules and limitations that I assumed that Oda would have for his characters throughout the story, because quite frankly, if you look at the attack that Loki did at the end of this chapter, that is essentially the same as what the ancient weapon did to Leloucia Kingdom. I'm serious, it is essentially that scale of destruction. Obviously, this didn't destroy the entire island, but that's because Elbaf is way bigger than the standard island. But for most islands in One Piece, Loki would have essentially have just erased it off the map. An even clearer comparison would be Enel's Raigo. I'm serious right now, if you want to go back and just take a look at Enel's Raigo destroying Skypiea and what Loki did at the end of this chapter, it feels pretty much the same. But what was crazy about the Raigo was that the Raigo was a move that Enel had to do a lot of prep for. He could only do it by using Maxim to really amplify his powers, and then he had to build the Raigo a lot over time, like a spirit bomb, to then drop it and erase an island. And at the time, that was insane. After that move, we never really saw firepower like that from a single Devil Fruit at any other point going forward in the story. It was kind of understood that the Raigo was sort of like a special instance, an anomaly amongst what Devil Fruit powers could do because of the whole Maxim situation. Normally, Devil Fruits can't really do stuff like that. But it looks like Loki can essentially just spit out Raigos as casually to him like it's a Boro Breath. I just don't know what to make of this, especially considering the fact that it also seems like he can imbue the attack with Conqueror's Haki. It's just mind-boggling, game-breaking stuff. I think Oda had a very effective scene in mind in general for debuting Loki's power, by having him essentially show up as this apex predator that just terrifies all of the MMAs and just sends them running, and he essentially hunts them down over the course of the chapter and wipes them all out in a single move. That is just a really cool setup to establish first that Elbaf is under attack from all of these gigantic, just absurdly huge monstrosities that are the MMAs. If you just remember earlier in the arc when the MMAs first show up, the reaction that the Giants of Elbaf, the Straw Hats, and of course we the readers had at that sight of just an array of monsters that are unfathomably large, that essentially make giants look like normal humans. And then for all along, Oda to have planted those characters essentially as a hype tool for then establishing just how huge and massive and powerful Loki is in comparison, making even the incomprehensible MMAs look like terrified little rabbits scurrying away from a lion. It's just cool storytelling. But first, you can become your favorite admiral with the first ever Logia hoodies. The Magma hoodie, the Ice hoodie, and the Light hoodie. And the best part is, for the official launch of the Logia line, this month, all hoodies are $80 off. And on top of that, if you buy 2 hoodies, you get the third one free. These are 100% cotton, multicolored jacquard hoodies made to order with patterns literally knitted directly into the fabric. And right over the heart, you have the embroidered Devil Fruit detail. All hoodies are made to order and will take some time to ship. So go get your hoodies right now while they're $80 off, and you can buy 2, get 1 free before the deal runs out. Just hit the link in the description below. So I absolutely love what Oda did with Loki this chapter. And we got a huge piece of lore connected right here with this chapter. I'm going to elaborate this in far greater detail in this Sunday's video, because I think several of One Piece's long-running mysteries just clicked into place with Yarl's story about this god of war and his past rivalry with the Sun God, or the Sun God user of a previous world. So definitely watch out for that video, but what I will say here is that we were very close to actually predicting this, because at the beginning of the arc, when it was established that Loki had eaten some very powerful fruit that is important to the land of Elbaf, I dropped a theory saying that Loki had eaten the warrior god fruit, because that is actually something that was established back in Little Garden, that the Giants of Elbaf believed in their warrior god. Now it turns out that this theory was just one step removed from being exactly on the nose, because Loki did not in fact eat the warrior god fruit, rather Loki ate the fruit that the warrior god seemed to have had in the past. So the connection from Little Garden did come full circle. We do see that Oda planted the seeds for all of these reveals way back in the past. But in classic Oda fashion, it came full circle in a manner that we could not have predicted. Now, aside from Loki, there are aspects of the chapter that I didn't quite love. So unfortunately, last week's chapter 1174 review had to be removed from our upload schedule, but you can see it on the Morge Archives channel. And in that chapter review, I deeply praise the emotional depth of Oda's writing with the entire scene that he wrote between the giant children and their loved ones. I think that is 11 out of 10, Oda at his best, thinking up of beautiful, unique scenarios that really create powerful, moving, dramatic scenes, even for a set of side characters. Seriously, I go into great detail breaking down a lot of the underrated brilliance of that scene in that chapter review, so go check it out if you get the chance. But I bring that up to say that I felt that we got a much more hollow version of that this week. And I'm not saying that every week we need god-tier emotional writing, but I personally didn't really feel anything when we got the scene this chapter of, the giant kids and their parents potentially about to die from Somers' thorns, with the giant kids talking about how they're going to protect their loved ones, etc. Something just felt a little bit more generic about this scene. It lacked the emotional gravitas of what we were getting before, and I think a large part of it is simply the fact that Oda's trying to manufacture some drama here when essentially the three strongest protagonists in the arc have all already shown up at the scene. And it's just blatantly clear that nothing bad is going to happen here. You've got Luffy, Loki, and Zoro. Last chapter, we of course knew that something is probably going to happen to save the giant kids and their loved ones. We knew that in the back of our minds, but it wasn't so overt and obvious how they're going to be saved, so the scene and its stakes and its emotions could play out in a more genuine manner where I actually felt what the characters were feeling. Whereas this scene felt more like, well, we're gonna die, but we're gonna be so brave about it, and kind of just going through the motions and just playing pretend a little bit, with Somers of course acting cartoonishly evil before the heroes do exactly what you expect and basically defeat Somers for the umpteenth time. And I think a little bit of my additional disappointment from this scenario might simply come from the fact that it appears at this point that Sanji is not going to be fighting Somers, and I don't think even Zoro is going to be fighting Somers. And even if Zoro or Sanji do end up fighting Somers, the bigger problem is just that any stakes associated with fighting this villain have just completely evaporated. It would now almost be worse in my mind if Zoro or Sanji were matched up with Somers, because the opponent feels like such a joke. In less than 30 chapters, no joke, within less than 30 chapters, Somers has been defeated by 4 different characters. Each time in a crushing, humiliating manner where he's essentially low-diffed over and over and over. Whether it's 80-year-old Scopper Gaban embarrassing him, Rayleigh straight up one-shotting him, Luffy this chapter one-shotting him, being followed up back-to-back with Loki literally stomping him on top of that. It's just getting kind of ridiculous. I genuinely think that in One Piece history, there has not been a run of L's like this, or even remotely similar to this. And I think I am just a little disappointed that a character who was actually an entertaining villain for some period of time, who seemed like he could be a great and much needed matchup for one of Luffy's two wings, Zoro or Sanji, ultimately just ended up being used to hype up Luffy yet again. My problem with this is that, yes, of course Luffy is the main character. He is meant to get the biggest moments, the biggest wins, the ultimate spotlight, right? I think where I personally start to dislike it is when Luffy also starts to just eat up the scraps as well that could easily go to other characters. Like, Somers is a classic villain subordinate character that you would expect to go to one of the other Straw Hats. He is strong enough that he would be a significant challenge for them, evil enough that we would really love to see a Straw Hat get a win against him, and he has a striking enough personality that he would actually make for a fairly memorable opponent for someone like Sanji. But it feels like now we're at a point in the story where even characters like that are just being given to Luffy instead of to the Straw Hats, who in the past we might have expected to get it. Yes, Zoro and Sanji technically had contributions in this chapter, but they're so laughably simple that I can't help but shake my head. Zoro deflects some thorns from Somers that I swear I wouldn't be surprised if Kinemon could do. And Sanji destroys Somers' thorns, but it's revealed that he's simply able to do so because, duh, fire just burns the thorns off, implying that basically literally anyone so far could have done it if they just thought to light a fire. This doesn't feel like Sanji just pulled off something really impressive. So essentially, on the one hand, Luffy and Loki, obviously amazing stuff, especially on Loki's end. Phenomenal debut and display of Loki's powers from Oda. This is a chapter that is very, very exciting. However, if you're a fan of the rest of the Straw Hats, and particularly of the two wings, Zoro and Sanji, who also came up as part of the cavalry to be the big heroes that saved the day, it does feel a little bit underwhelming that in reality it's really Loki and Luffy who are going to do everything and save everyone, and Sanji is relegated to basically being a torch, and Zoro deflects some projectiles, while Loki goes around dropping island-sized nukes on pretty much the vast majority of the enemies. Again, this is Loki's debut, so I understand what Oda is doing here. I do not mind at all Loki getting the spotlight. This is his time. I just hope that Oda does not spend yet another arc with the Straw Hats not getting anything either. I've been talking for a long time in videos, expressing my optimism that I'm seeing a lot of signs this arc that we are going to get more for the Straw Hats. We are going to get some spotlight. They don't need the main spotlight, but they should get something. And I still feel like that is likely, but I can't help but admit that I am surprised to see that even the God's Knights figures like Sommers are seemingly not going to go to some of the Straw Hats like Zoro and Sanji. Like even simple villains that are way below Luffy and Loki's weight class, for some reason are being given to Luffy and Loki rather than the characters that seem like the perfect matchups for them. So I don't know, I hope that trend doesn't continue. I will say that at this point, even if now Sommers is turned into a Sanji opponent or a Zoro opponent, I just would not be able to take that challenge seriously. So I hope that Oda has more exciting stuff planned for the Straw Hats in the future of this arc. And forget Zoro and Sanji, really, Usopp is the one that I think is in most desperate need. So I hope that Oda is able to cook something up for him, something that he's had planned for a long time. Also, congratulations to Taptio Treviso and Crow Stray God for their correct predictions about this chapter. Make sure to tune into Friday streams every break week to get in on the chapter predictions competitions. But beyond my points about the Straw Hats, I do think overall this was a very, very exciting chapter, just a really cool chapter. Loki's fighting style is amazing, the Devil Fruit abilities are mind-blowing, and the lore reveals fit in a lot of missing pieces that we had before, but again, I will talk about that in tomorrow's video. So watch out for tomorrow's video. I'm rating this chapter an 8.5 out of 10, and with that, I will talk to you all later.